So today's all about competency frameworks, and the first one I'm going to look at is around trusted assessors. And we can start to work on a competency framework, I think, because it's quite a new role, and it kind of sits in between and alongside other professions, other services, other skills. And we wanted to make sure that we set out what it means to be a competent trusted assessor and be able to assess for DFGs, and differentiating that from kind of OTs and others who may also do assessments. But we're then going to be broadening that out into other roles as well. So very much the place where we thought was best to start was around trusted assessors. So that's where we're going to start. And I will hand over to Rachel to take us through it.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Yeah, so I'm just going to take you through some of the work that we've been doing over the last year or so, developing the competency framework. Just take you through the journey that we've been on. I think one of the dilemmas that we had was around actually what to call it. Obviously, we are calling it trusted assessor, but just to kind of explain the dilemma that we had was, if we think about the Housing Grants Construction Regeneration Act, so that's the image, that's my moth-eaten copy of my legislation on the right-hand side there. If you actually look at the legislation and the original intent, so obviously the legislation was written 29 years ago, but the original intent of the legislation was that the applicant would actually approach the housing authority to apply for the works, the adaptations that they were wanting. And then obviously, as part of the housing authority's duties in determining eligible works, then there was that decision around, well, are the works necessary and appropriate, reasonable, practicable? And as we know in the legislation, this is where we get that phrase around housing consulting with social care around necessary and appropriate. And that's because social care and specifically occupational therapists have that expertise around understanding how the design of people's homes influences how well or how not so well people are able to do those everyday activities, can work with our technical officer housing colleagues to ensure that any adaptations are necessary and appropriate. So that's where we get that custom and practice around social care getting involved with the assessment. Now, over 30 years, the custom and practice has been that people don't go to the housing authority in the first instance. Actually, what they do is they go through that social care front door. So this is what we tend to see in the majority of local authorities across England. There are some exceptions where people do go to housing, but in the majority of local authorities that certainly we work with, then actually social care has actually become the gatekeeper to people applying for adaptations and not the consultee. What happens then is, if you look at this image on the right hand side, is housing then has to wait for that social care assessment, or the applicant has to wait for that social care assessment. And we know in a lot of areas there can be a significant wait, particularly where people have more simpler needs, perhaps at less risk of waiting. So what we call at foundations the little Mrs. Russells, who perhaps just need a bathing assessment. So it's often those people that end up waiting for a significant amount of time for that assessment. Then once that assessment happens, then often they can then wait in housing for the application to be picked up. So what we tend to find is, actually over the last 30 years, custom and practice has overridden the original legislation, so that social care becomes the gatekeeper. But actually, when you look at the legislation, actually social care OTs are the trusted assessors, because it's housing that is trusting that assessment to social care to carry out. So that's why we've just struggled with it. We are sticking with the name of Trusted Assessor. Now, I know we've got a number of OTs in the audience. That's not to say that we want to change things drastically. We do recognise, I am an occupational therapist myself, very passionate OT, because we recognise there are real benefits for occupational therapists, particularly involved in the more complex cases, because we can bring those specialist assessment skills. We work in a strength-based way. So for housing, you know that when you get a referral from an occupational therapist to say, look, I think this person could be eligible to apply for a DFG, what you can be reassured of is that the occupational therapist has worked in a strength-based way, so that they've looked at whether the person just needs to change the way they're doing the activity, whether there are any alternative equipment, assistive technology, any minor adaptations, so that you know that piece of work has been done, protecting the DFG for those individuals that do need that. Obviously, as occupational therapists, we are a registered profession as well, so that you know that you're dealing with, practitioners that have got those high standards and accountability. And what occupational therapists in social care can do really well, and what we've seen in other areas that have got really good trusted assessor models, is those occupational therapists can support non-specialist social care assessors, those practitioners, perhaps caseworkers, technical officers, who are perhaps doing some of the assessments around necessary and appropriate. And OTs in social care can be a fantastic resource for supporting those non-specialist social care assessors. So we are sticking with the name Trusted Assessor, but it's just about, I think, it's just being about being aware that actually around that relationship between housing and social care in terms of the DFG process. So why have we focused on non-specialist assessors? We know from the Bath Out 2 study that home adaptations, when we get them installed in a timely manner, can really support people and transform lives and really promote independence. But as I say, we need to get those adaptations in quickly, because the longer people wait, the more likely there's likely to be an adverse event, or they're less likely to gain the benefits from having the home adapted. So we do need to think about new pathways to provide quicker access to those simpler DFG applications, so that the stair lifts, the ramps, the wet rooms. So we need new pathways to do things differently, and obviously having trusted assessors is that mechanism that will support newer pathways, so that perhaps we don't have to wait for people to sit unnecessarily on social care waiting lists. So it's about using the expertise that we have already got in the DFG process. We've got really skilled and experienced technical officers. We've got brilliant and experienced and skilled caseworkers as well, that already bring their expertise, already supporting the determination of eligible works. And what we're saying with trusted assessor training, based on a really good competency framework, that we can help those practitioners gain the skills and knowledge to confidently carry out those assessments around what is necessary and appropriate. And what we've done is develop some real clear competency standards, so that people feel confident that when they go through the trusted assessor training, based on the competencies, that they have got those skills and knowledge, and to be able to carry out those assessments around necessary and appropriate. So who we see the trusted assessor being, I've already mentioned caseworkers and technical officers. The framework is also really useful for new social care staff coming into the world of social care, who are going to be recommending DFG, so again that they have that understanding. So those are who we are seeing this competency framework being for. So just in terms of development, just to give you some reassurance, it's taken us quite a while to develop the competency framework, and we've liaised with a number of occupational therapists. I think we've got James Hallard on in the virtual room, who's given us feedback as well. So we have liaised with a number of relevant people to give us feedback on the framework. There is a QR code up in the corner, which I'm assuming if you click on that or shine your phone, that will take you through to the competency framework, which is now on the website. So as I go through this, you can have a look at it in a bit more detail. So we've, with the feedback, we've structured the framework into two parts. There are core competencies, skills and knowledge that influence the whole of the DFG process. And then part two of the competency framework are three very specific stages of the adaptations process. So we have extended it slightly beyond just assessment, to also include the stage of recommending and supporting the design of the adaptation, as well as the review and handover as well. So yeah, framework is in two parts. So core competencies that a person needs to demonstrate throughout the DFG process, and then some very specific competencies around assessment, recommendation, review and handover. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to show you the full framework. You can look at that on the website, but I'll just show you some examples of some of the specific competencies. So as you can see, it's divided into the knowledge that we expect, the skills, as well as the behaviour we would expect to be demonstrated. And this one is for core competency A, which is around professional communication and person-centred practice. So you've got things like, in terms of knowledge, aware of cultural and personal factors that are going to impact on the decision, and including existing resources and support network. In terms of skills, you expect somebody to have the skill around, as you can see there, the second one, demonstrating respect for the individual, dignity and autonomy, acknowledging personal strengths and capabilities. And then in terms of behaviour around professional communication, you would expect behaviours around people maintaining non-judgmental approaches towards personal choices. So that's what the core competency for A looks like. And then this is the one for B, which is around professional boundaries. So knowing when to hand over a case, and also around collaborative working. DFG is collaborative working is so critical for effective assessment design of adaptation. So as you can see there, again, you've got the knowledge, the various knowledge that we would expect for professional boundaries, collaborative working, the skills you'd expect, so communicates clearly and professionally with colleagues across disciplines, and then behaviours. So you've got an example there about maintaining open and responsive communication with colleagues. And then I think this one is just, as you remember, it's split into two parts. So this is stage one, which focuses on the assessment element, and what you can see there again are the knowledge, skills and behaviours that expect. So what you would expect for a trusted assessor in terms of knowledge, in terms of PEO assessment, is a basic understanding of common health conditions and how they impact on occupations, how they impact on those everyday activities people want, need and have to do. You've got the skills there, so it applies that strength-based principles when conducting the assessment, so thinking about what it is the person wants to do. And then you've got the behaviours there, so you'd expect demonstrating respect when observing daily activities, recognising people's skills and knowledge. So it's not just about thinking about the competency framework, not just thinking about how the competency framework supports training, but it's also about how you implement a trusted assessor program as well. So we worked with Claire Barber a couple of years ago, Claire from TACT, and she's written this implementing a successful trusted assessor program that we've built on as well, which just talks about that it's not just about the training, it's supporting that change management. So how you bring your team with you as you look at implementing a trusted assessor program, how you implement that collaboration and the different pathways that you need to support that trusted assessor process. Talks about the training support you would expect and how, from a senior leadership perspective, you do that review and monitoring of your trusted assessor bits. If anybody is thinking about doing trusted assessor, bringing in a trusted assessor program, please get in contact with us, get in contact with your regional advisor, because we'd be more than delighted to talk about how we can support you to do that. Paul's alluded to that at the moment where we've focused on trusted assessor, so those simpler adaptations, but we have also developed a framework for experienced practitioners. So those are kind of probably social care OTs with a bit of experience that are dealing with the full range of cases that might be supporting trusted assessors, as well as the more specialist practitioners. So those might be occupational therapists with very specialist knowledge, perhaps around behaviours of concern, that deal with the really complex cases and provide that professional leadership as well. So those competency frameworks for those two types of practitioners, the experienced practitioner and the specialist practitioners, will be coming shortly. And this just gives you a feel for what that looks like. So this is competency C, which is around legislation and funding. And as you can see, the knowledge, can't find the word, but as you can see, you've got trusted assessor with kind of that basic understanding, what you would then expect an experienced practitioner to have in terms of knowledge around legislation and funding. And then this final column is what you would expect the advanced practitioner. So it kind of builds in terms of expertise there. So that just gives you a little bit of a feel for what that will look like when we publish those frameworks for experienced practitioner and specialist practitioner as well. And I think that's it. Yeah, so the final thoughts is what the reason that we've done this is, for us at Foundations, it's about how we support people to get the adaptations as quickly as possible, how we can support you as a sector to develop those pathways, which we know are already happening out there. But hopefully we think the competency framework will give you that assurance around what we would expect the skills and knowledge and behaviours of those staff to be. It will then help you use your workforce. Your technical officer and caseworkers have already got those excellent skills, and just building a little bit more on what they're doing so that they can deal with those more simpler ones. We hope that we try to do it so it really spells out what we expect from everybody, and that everybody understands what their role is, help support those relationships, those collaborative relationships that we need in terms of the DFG process. And ultimately we have developed it in a person-centered way, in a family-centered way, so that people get the support that they need. So yeah, hopefully that's been a useful whistle-stop tour of the competency framework. So I'll hand back to Paul.
Thank you, Rachel. We've had a couple of questions come through. So I suppose more of a comment from James that it's going to help principal OTs and service managers to communicate the level of knowledge needed in these areas as well. Because I think kind of when we've been developing them, we thought that they'd be really helpful for things like job descriptions as well as kind of the basis for those.
Yes, yeah, role profiles, those kind of things. Yeah.
And Jenny was asking about trusted assessors working in children's services.
Um, oh, that's a good one. I guess we've all when we so I was involved in writing with adaptations without delay, and we always kind of said with the children's one, they do tend to be more complex cases. But that's not to say where perhaps you've got more simpler cases that the competencies wouldn't be relevant. But again, I think when you read the competencies, because it's about because obviously one is around the PEO, but it's whether actually it covers those more complex children's cases. Certainly, the specialist one would cover more the kind of skills and knowledge that you would expect for an assessor for working with children.
Yeah, they tend to be more complicated, don't they?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when we were doing the recent roadshows, we did have another session looking at high cost and kind of complex adaptations, and I'm sure we'll be revisiting that at Foundations Live in the future for those of you who couldn't attend.
Because I think the thing is, isn't it? It's not always the It's not always the adaptation that is being requested that is complex. And this is what the argument that we made in adaptations without delay is. It's the person's situation, and what you tend to find with children is that you are dealing with children with more complex needs, where you've got a number of services involved, where they're probably still going through some of the diagnostic bits and pieces. So yeah, which makes those situations more complex rather than just the adaptation.
And then Pip was asking about who provides the supervision for trusted assessors.
So it's somebody with the appropriate skills and knowledge. So usually would be an occupational therapist that has ideally, if we're talking about DFG, you would hope to think in terms of that collaboration. There would be some opportunity to collaborate with social care colleagues. I appreciate that that's not always the case in some local authorities, but you need somebody that has got the competency to carry out that level of supervision.
Yeah, and as we're going on to in a second, kind of part of the training is to kind of recognise cases that you can't actually handle as a trusted assessor. So, in a second, Tracy will be talking about trusted assessor training, and so Rebecca also asked about how to demonstrate the competence in these areas, and we're talking about that in a few minutes as well, Rebecca. So that's a very nice lead in. So thank you for now, Rachel. We'll come back to you in a little while to talk about next week's show as well. Thank you.